Hey guys, Silk here again, back with part 2 of my, bugs, suggestions, general comments for the Project Nova team. We're going to start off here with a bit of a curly one. I'm just sort of in the middle of a battle here. Basically over here we've got this outpost here. That's appearing as a Tyrannus when I come onto here. In actual fact, that's an Eldarin guy. If I just click on here, we see it says it's tuner here now. Shortly earlier on, that was actually saying that that outpost there belonged to an Eldarin player. That's not so long ago. We'll see if it comes back to that again shortly. So that's one issue, is that these things keep changing now and again as to who that actually is. I've been caught out with it a few times and actually attempted to attack one once and ended up simply deploying my army to it. So that was a bit of a bust. Next thing I want to talk about that comes to mind immediately, I've been on here playing for less than 10 minutes and my ships are pretty much out of fuel. Now some guy somewhere sort of extended a view, which is totally entitled to, that their game was not casual enough and that perhaps it should take 2 days for ships to refuel entirely. Well, I'm big to differ. I don't think that people are going to wait 2 days just for 10 minutes of game time. And there's a number of other things also that have come out about the game, saying it needs to be a bit more casual. People are not going to be able to keep up and so on. I think really realistically, players are going to need to accept, your players who have come into this test completely new to this, they need to accept that this type of game is actually designed for 24/7 play. It's around the clock, it's a real-time strategy, it's kind of the more hardcore end of online RTS games. There are a number of other types of games out there, particularly popular are the sort of the Game of War, Clash of Kings, King of Avalon clones, if you like, and they will start off around kind of 2015 era, where you can simply shield up and teleport around and basically protect yourself at all times. Well, there's no great loss here in this type of game. When you actually lose your base, it just gets relocated somewhere on the map. You lose maybe 5 or 10% of your resource, and that's about it, and you start over again. You'll normally get relocated into a region that your faction already owns. If you don't own one, it'll go to your spawn zone. And that's about it, and you keep on playing. So it's no great hardship to get kind of wiped out and whacked. The whole element of the game is to work as a team to conquer regions together and eventually get some kind of central control point. So I just want to kind of respond to that idea that the game is not casual enough. It's not designed to be. This type of game is not a casual game. This is the type of game that attracts people that are playing well, probably a minimum 4 hours a day, and generally 6, maybe 8 upwards. It's pretty hardcore wargaming. You've got your phone on a lot of the time. Certainly as the seasons progress. Perhaps in the first season, the initial season you go into, and it is designed as a seasonal game, you might find that you don't need to spend quite as much time in there, but the benefits for doing so and for grinding are enormous, and most people would expect to do that. So we'll move on to a couple of other things, and one of my bugbears here is the fact, and I talked about it in a previous video, is the fact that when I go on, I've got 26 down here, 26 battle reports, and do I see the most recent one when I come on? No, I see one that's completely irrelevant, and I actually got to scroll all the way up here, costing me a few seconds to see what's attacked me and where it happens to be. I find that quite annoying as a kind of hardened wargamer. So that's another little bugbear. The next one is perhaps in here where I now have a whole bunch of ships to repair. Now, in any other game like this, I would be picking 4 of these types at random. Well, probably actually not at random. I'd choose which ones I need at the time. And I would have 4 separate healing queues so that I would be able to repair these consecutively instead of concurrently. If I decide that I want to do it here, it's a little bit misleading. I'll go here and it tells me it's going to take 1 hour and 1 minute to do all of those. And this hasn't gone up, but I know for a fact that that is now added on to this. If I was to do it the other way round, I could go here and that's going to take me 16 minutes. I now go up to here, it's going to take me an hour. That's actually going to take me an hour and 17 minutes. If I max all of these, which I'm going to for illustrative purposes only, I can confirm that up, and we will now see how long is that going to take. 3.5 hours to clear my repair bay and to get those things back. It's fairly ridiculous. I can go in and fabricate a few more ships, but because of the way in which this works, this blue bar up here, this is what's being repaired at the moment. So I've now got a small section left to fabricate some more fairly quickly. It's not really geared up for competitive, hyper-competitive play. So I think two things from that. One is that certainly the repair bay needs to have 4 consecutive queues rather than 4 concurrent queues rather than consecutively or cumulatively. And I think also that we need to actually have a much higher set of command points. I've got very little sitting in reserve to load my ships up with again, and so my 10 minutes of game time, I'm pretty much out of action for 3.5 hours. I think I've got my one main ship left, and once that goes down against a number of these guys from Eldarin, who, you know, kudos to them, they're coming in numbers, I don't stand much of a chance, and that's fine. I'm not complaining about that. That's as it should be. But it would be nice to be able to come back in an hour or two and actually play again rather than waiting a full 3.5 hours. So I guess that's a little bit of a bugbear there. And kind of while we're talking about it, what have we got here? And one more bug I think to have a quick look at, and that's down here on these chapters. Now, I got to chapter 20 and completed that a good few days ago. What happened when I then got to that? This is definitely a bug, I think, because what happened when I completed chapter 20, I had a little message popped up that said something like colonial reward chest now available. But what it did was it locked out my battle pass, and it just tells me that I've got all of these things. Has my battle pass progressed at all since just under 10? No, it hasn't. So it's not progressing daily, and there's no way I can keep leveling that battle pass up. So there's a bit of a little glitch there that I think we probably need to have a look at. Just going to collect these because this takes me on to another issue, and that is the fact that up the top here with the resources, these have been maxed out pretty much since within the first hour or two of playing, and that is due to the fact that there are so many resources available. I think from the battle pass, the free one gives only resources. The achievements currently give only resources. The chapters give only resources as rewards. Now, I'm assuming that that's probably going to change in the live version. I sincerely hope so, or you're going to end up with probably not a very large player base. I would expect to see things like speed ups to complete buildings, to complete the fabrication of ships, to complete the the repair of strikecraft within that. I'm just going to take a little break and come back to this while I gather my thoughts for the next part. Okay, so what I'd really like to look at now is just some of the things that I love. I love the fact that I can zoom in and out just like this. I've not seen this before on a game to this sort of level in all the time I've played these types of games. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I like the way the map has been laid out for the terrain, if you like. We've got the little static star map in the background. We've got this second layer here with resources and things on, with its best sort of 2.5D representation of those. And we've got this next layer here that our ships can go up to. I like the fact that we've got these layers here. I don't know about whether or not the opportunity is there to build more layers in. I'm sure it probably is, and I think that really kind of, I've talked previously in the Discord about the fact that this has potential and it leaves doors open rather than closes them shut like some other tests and betas that I've done and taken part in. So I think that's quite fantastic, basically. There are some other bits and pieces about the game that I particularly like. I like the way in which I can sort of easily access my ships up the side here. I like the fact that I can view them, and the fact that with the fuel replacement, it tells me precisely how long it will take before that ship can come back into action. I think those are all fantastic additions. I very much do. So I'm really kind of happy with that one. And now I'll go on and come up with a couple of suggestions. I guess we'll go through screen by screen and various different elements of the game where I think things could perhaps be a little bit better improved. We'll make a start with all the sort of the itty bitty bits before we get into the major stuff. So one thing which is absolutely essential to a game like this is being able to communicate with people, and we see this here. I can pick either the galaxy, the faction, or the guild. I like the fact the guild is pre-built with some sub-chats. I hope that there's an option to add or remove sub-channels under here. I suspect there might well be, given that we've got a few built in already. We've got our personal contacts here with people. It's Jacob again. We've had a chat, mentioned him once before. The reason I like Jacob is he knows how to play the game. He keeps building these sodding outposts all over the place that take us forever to knock down, and that's fantastic. It's really nice to see as someone who's come in fairly new to the game and already worked that kind of thing out. That's great. That's a pain in the backside for a small faction like ourselves. We've got about 3, maybe 4 active members now. We simply don't have the fuel to take that sort of thing out when we've got 8 or 9 players coming at us. Great tactics. That's what I love about games like this, seeing great tactics. But sorry, I digress. Communication. I would like the ability to build custom channels here that you can then invite maybe 100, 200 people into, so you can actually play together as a faction without necessarily using this faction chat here. This faction chat here is open to abuse. Other factions can put spies in there and land them in there. Sure, that could be a bit of the game, but eventually everyone gets feels aggravated about that. So being able to set up new chats in this area would be fantastic. You could then have them for small squads within your guild. You could have a squad function within the guild if you wanted to, that could then set those up, or you could just leave it so that players can create their own sort of private chat groups with friends they've made along the way, who may even go on to different servers or different campaigns or seasons as the seasons go on. My real kind of annoyance here, the thing I'm frustrated with the most, is being able to contact other players. In any other game like this, I could click on a tile like that and there would be an option to then be able to somehow click on the player's name here and then open up a chat with them. I've heard people saying, no, we don't necessarily want that, you get abuse. Well, you don't actually have to read it, and really the game functions a lot better with being able to do that. Currently, the only way to contact someone or find them is if I click on a ship there, and then I can click on the chat channel, and of course that opens up an existing chat here, but I could chat with someone new. Alternatively, I could go into my guild and then look at the members, and then coming down here I could probably click on one of them, and again that's going to open up my chat with them. So I can access people in my guild, that's fine. I can't access anyone in my faction. I can't access a friendly opponent, if you like, to have a chat with them. I find that particularly aggravating. If they were ranked, I could maybe look at them in here and find out where they're at. So it's really dysfunctional for competitive play, and I'm just think that you'll lose people by not having the ability to be able to contact them more easily. I think you should be able to click on one of their tiles and immediately be able to mail them. That would be my personal ideal. We've just touched on a couple of the other things there. So one is the guild itself, and we'll pop in there, we'll have a look at this guild screen. If I'm running a guild myself, which I'm not at this time, I would expect to be able to look at these stats and click on one of them and then rank those in order. These are all things that perhaps or quite likely will be in the full launch of the game anyway, so I acknowledge that. I'm just sort of pointing them out in case they have been overlooked. What I would also like to see is, right, other than influence here, is some kind of contribution stat for the contribution that individual players have made towards the group. Normally, we would see in a game like this, the guild starts with perhaps 10 players, and then as the more and more contribution comes into the guild, it expands. You can get in an extra 10 players and then another 10 and so on as those contributions build up. I think that there was room probably for a few other things in there, perhaps some kind of a merit system for PvP battles, since that's pretty much the aim of the game. If you could have that in there, that would be great. And then as a guild leader, you can really see who's active, who's participating. You get a good idea of where they're at. Players who are not so strong in PvP, you might see that they're really good in their contribution. You might have someone who's got a really high influence but hasn't taken part in any kind of player versus player action and therefore has no merit whatsoever, and you're left wondering what on earth you're doing. You're essentially carrying that player so they can farm. Well, that's no use to the group as a whole. So I'd like to see some more stats come up in that area. This recruitment screen here, however, something that you come across in many other games, but not so much in these Geo-strat games, and I love this. I see this in so many other games, so the introduction of that, absolutely fantastic. I think that's great. What would be another great addition would be able to have some emojis down the bottom here in the chat channel. That will just improve quality of life so much. So I have to put in Simia Fuel Tanker, haha, we'll do that. It would be nice to have a bit of a laughing face in there or something similar. I would personally quite like that. I'm going to have a quick chat now just about some of these things at the top here, Helion in particular. In the early stages of the game, you really don't need to be using this if things stay as they are in the test, and that's quite annoying in as much as you want to be able to achieve some of your battle pass rewards. Well, one of the weekly ones is perform war games, which gives you experience with the ship and mining resources for extra resources, when essentially you don't really need them. I found myself maxed, as I said earlier, maxed out with resources. I found that my ships were already kind of ridiculously high in experience anyway. And so there's no point to me actually completing these things other than for the battle pass. And if I then do that and perform these war games and mine resources, that's 2 of my ships out for the better part of the day, really, because they're going to need to refuel afterwards, and my Helion is down, so there's little point to it. So I think probably need to have a bit of a think about how all these different things interact with one another. Again, that may well have been done for the full game, but I'm not seeing it here in the playtest, and I mean, I get that the playtest here is not really set up to look at everything that needs to be involved. Once again, I'm just kind of pointing some of this stuff out to be thought about, to make sure that it has been thought about. What else have we got on my list down here? Excuse me, just looking down at my little list here. Somebody came up with the idea of an AI faction, which has been really interesting. I've seen this in a couple of other games like this before. The issue with it is that it basically, if it's not done right, and I've never seen it done right, all it does is it gives a real boost to the factions that live next door to the AI faction, because they're basically getting free experience for their ships. And I think it's really difficult to introduce an AI faction that experienced players are basically not gonna basically abuse. If it's there and it's in the game mechanics, people are going to go with it. So be very careful with introducing an AI faction, unless of course it happens to be the fact that the faction itself is AI rather than some kind of race, in which case that's just another faction. That's fine. Talking about abusing experience, one of the things that kind of set our little group of 3 or 4 up really well in the first instance was the fact that we left one of these control points, because we worked out that if we hit 10 armies on one of these control points, we're going to get 440,000 XP if we beat all 10 of them, which once you've got your ship to about level 40 is perfectly feasible. So we kind of leveled up real quick, and that worked out really well for us. So there's all sorts of systems and things in place that you need to think about. It's very rare to actually see a place where the major control points give experience to, whether it's in this particular case the capital ships, or in other games it's commanders or gyros, or whatever the main kind of collectible primary item happens to be, and the good reason for it. What they do have is things like tiles like this 200, there's a 230, a 260, a 300. This is all very sort of generic code that this all comes from. And as a base game, obviously everyone sort of plays with it in their own way. But I think if you do that, then you will find that people are not able to level those ships up as quickly. It will cost them certainly higher levels of resource and so on. I get that probably the defenders in here are going to be tweaked. I mean, level 40 is the highest we've seen in here, so with a level 42 ship you're probably going to cream most of those defenders in one hit, and there are going to be points where you're not able to do that. So there's an awful lot of balancing, I think, that needs to be done within the game, and that's only really going to come through with more play testing, probably a full beta at some point. That would be really handy, closed or open. Love to take part, by the way, if that's in there, and provide more feedback if you think it's useful. That would be grand. There we go. So I just took a brief break to deploy some ships here to Lumina, since we're under attack. One last thing on the communication is translation. Currently our 3-4 active players here come from Russia, Turkey and New Zealand, and basically we're having to hop in and out of Google just to be able to translate this stuff. That's not that feasible when you launch it to a mobile game. I'm kind of assuming there's some kind of plug-in translation, and ideally auto translation that can be done, but I figured it's probably just worth mentioning in there. Next up, rankings. These are great. Power rankings, influence generation, fantastic. Yeah, what I'd like to see is maybe a couple of other stats that you can look at, so as some kind of merit for player versus player, and possibly just at maybe a guild level contribution. All in all, it's fairly generic. You know, you've got people who say that this thing is, it just means that people are just kind of farming. Well, to a certain extent it's probably true. I'm looking through here and I only see perhaps one of those people that I've ever actually fought against in these top areas here, and certainly Ograx, this orange one here, I don't think that I've really seen any of them coming in to help us out at all. So Ograx and Tyrannus, if you wanted to know, we're basically allied to take on the Elder earlier in the game. That has kind of run its course now. I've got a player here, PHCR, they have a leader who's gone missing in action from within the first few hours, and so we've just got this random person here who's just sitting there farming. We've never seen them take part in any player versus player at all, so it'd be nice to see some merit up there as well. I could probably, if we were playing for a lot longer, I'd be contacting that person saying, hey, look, come and join us. That's how we kind of started out. So a bit more on the ranking side of things. Buildings, let's go in and have a quick look at buildings now. Again, this is another thing. If I want to look at my buildings, I either have to go to control point and kind of go to infrastructure and do it that way. That's not too bad. I actually quite like that. Or I've got to go all the way back here and then go into here, and then I've got to press enter. It'd be really nice just to have a little icon down the bottom somewhere, but it's not a biggie. I can go into it from control. The great thing about going into it via the station is that I now pick either infrastructure or I can pick my command center, which really doesn't actually tell me a great deal. It's pretty, but there's just some basic stats in there. This is where I fabricate. Great. Battle groups. Got any in the station, so how do I access them and rearrange them? Well, I have to go back out onto the map and do that. And the repair bay, I think that could be a bit more functional, and certainly in terms of the infrastructure here, that's very limited compared to most games. These are the real bare basics to set up basically a play test of the if you like, the player versus player mechanics and the combat mechanics, and that's fair enough. I would expect to see a lot more in here at a later date. Certainly things that would perhaps increase the amount of command points. You can have various ships in your fabrication facility, something to do with guild and guild contributions, maybe earning guild contribution points you could spend in a store, maybe a market perhaps. I see up here we've got some in-game currency, so I'm assuming those sorts of things are actually going to get introduced in here. I think we're limited here to 3 in particular types of faction strike craft. I believe the full game is going to be 8 factions, so I would guess that the additional one that might slot in here hasn't been built, or it may simply be that you only get the 3. I quite like that idea, so you could sort of kind of mix and match then as to which faction you go for. Undoubtedly there will be 1 or 2 majorly popular factions if you go down that route, because there will be a combination of 3 of these that will basically cream everything else. Certainly will be superior, so perhaps it would be an idea to widen those out, or even have the ability to perhaps add another one on here. I think where we split as something like Dominion and I can't even remember where's the pro? Good lord, I can't even find the thing now. Basically you got the goodies and the baddies. so it seems. I get that. What I think would be pretty cool would be is if you could perhaps you could build an espionage facility, and then once you've got that built to a certain point, that means you've stolen the technology of one of the opposing good or bad factions, and you'll manage to get some of their technology, and you could perhaps build out here a building that fabricates the strike craft and capital ship for a certain faction, and then you build another one for the other faction, and so on, so that you then have, as you progress through the game, an option to run any ship with any strike craft. I think that would be kind of cool, and being able to do it via espionage, that's feasible, that's realistic. I think that might be a nice addition to the game. I'm going to pop on here now, and we're going to look at upgrading our abilities. Really, in here there are some that are must-haves, and there's some that are absolutely superfluous. Anything to do here with resources is just really, at the moment, it's kind of worthless. You're getting a few percentages more. I honestly don't know anyone who's going to even bother with that. But all you've got to do is get your battle stats up, and you're going to be picking up the tiles that you need that just make this completely and utterly redundant. It's been the same in every single game of this genre, and absolutely pointless having them. So maybe try and think of something better. Realistically, I would probably sit here and spend a day or two thinking about it and come up with something. You've got your dead certs, which are going to be this here: integral fuel tanks, improving the amount of fuel limits of all ships. I wonder, maybe you could get away with bumping that up a little. That plus 30 is the standard for most games, but perhaps you might want to think about pushing that up a bit, especially if you're starting off in Season 1 with only a few ships at your control. It's going to be a pretty boring game. As I've just demonstrated, 10 minutes, I'm done with most of my fuel. War games, yeah, it's kind of good, but it needs to be a much better payoff than this. Combat readiness just increases that by 100%. But honestly, if for 20 fuel I can go and get 440,000 by hitting a control point, or 88,000 by hitting a 200 tile, that war games plus combat readiness needs to be really worth it to be pumping this in, and then an extra 10 points in there. I think that's a single one, so 10 points there. It's honestly not worth it. Increases units damage output against enemy patrols. Let's talk about enemy patrols. Okay, that has currently got to be the biggest waste of time ever. Why on earth would I be spending my precious fuel on tiling to first one of these patrols? So that's going to take me 60 of my 100, and I'm up to 150 now, but that's going to take me 60 of my 150 fuel just to go and hit a defender. That makes no sense. So how about we don't have to tile to these things to be able to hit them? That might actually improve what we do, and definitely improve the rewards that it drops. I'm really not that interested in resources, so random rewards would be better. That might actually make it worth it, but until then, that's just a pointless waste of my fuel trying to hit one of those. I get very little experience for them. I'm not getting much in the way of instant resource for it, so I'd rather go for the longer term resource for my economy. So yeah, I don't know, these are all great. Arcane Infusion, Tactical Overdrive's a must, Overcharge is great. These are just a route to get to the others. I think this one here, with the amount of tiles to get extra, is set at bang on the right level. That makes the game enjoyable, gives you plenty of tiles to get. Helium, well, that really just remains to be seen what you can use it for. Thus far, the only thing I've used it for is to move outside of the range controls of my base and my outposts. And then scout, yeah, maybe could be of some use, but frankly at the moment, instead of scouting, I would scout a tile. But if I'm kind of sitting over here and I just want to, where are we? See if I can find my dread. Oh, they've all been killed. Never mind. If I go over here and I just click on someone's ship, well, it already tells me it's a level 37 Radiant. That in itself is another issue. I don't want to know what's in there. I mean, I do want to know what's in there, but somebody knows what's on mine. And just the number of times I've sat one of my level 50 dreads somewhere and everyone just passes it by, which you'd be foolish not to, really. Yeah, I don't think that that kind of indicates that you've essentially got absolute knowledge of everything over the entire map. I really want to see that go. And also from a kind of like a fun tactics position as well, you then could send in a sort of small scout level, like with me it would be my Dark Fame, my lowest level. I put like one strike craft on it and I could go in and just scout that to see what's there. That would be great. But then by the time I send another ship against it, they might have switched it out, put something else in there and caught me unawares. Alternatively, I might just want to sit it somewhere and guard, and someone's going to think twice about hitting that because there's a guard on there and they don't know what it is, so they're going to have to waste fuel sending it. That all adds to the interest in the tactics of the game. Just going to take a quick break again in case you hadn't noticed. If I turn my head down this way, it's to turn off my OBS or pause it. Which I've done a few times already, and gather a few more ideas together. So I'll be back in a sec, and for you it'll be in no time. Okay, and we're back, and just picked up a kind of just another little wee bugbear. I've just sort of been away and had a bit of a battle with some of the Eldering guys, and going through some of my reports, and I find my cipher here has been knocked about a bit. As we say in New Zealand, a little bit munted up. And fortunately won that one. And then I'm looking through these to find out where I've lost, because it's certainly been sent back. And lo and behold, I find it underneath a dread set of reports. So it kind of won there, defeated there. These were all sitting on the same tile. They're actually sitting on Lumina control point. So I'm kind of trying to understand the logic as to how this cipher sits underneath the dread here, and yet these were all at similar times. So I would have thought that either, if we're doing it based off the coordinates of the tile, I would expect to see perhaps all these in one, or simply that these were perhaps a second or two apart, so they're kind of come up and it's based on the tile. Normally in other games I would expect to see those things perhaps grouped by the ship rather than necessarily the coordinate, but that's going to take a bit of getting used to, I guess, especially since the coordinate doesn't actually pop up in here, or we have to read it over here. Just a kind of little thing that's taking a bit of getting used to. And as I mentioned before, we've got this thing where I'm somewhere all the way down the bottom here and trying to get up and stop here to find out what's going on recently. Anyway, not so hard. I just want to sort of finish up this part 2, and there will be one final one that I'll do perhaps a little bit later this evening. It's starting to get dark here down under. As overall, what I found was that it's the game itself, as it is at the moment, just for this playtest, it's too easy. It's actually remarkably easy to level the ship up. It's remarkably easy to max out the resources. It's remarkably easy to get really high up in the rankings. I think at one point I was at number 2 before I just decided I couldn't be bothered anymore. I was just going to do PvP. Those things are really straightforward. They were achievable within the first day or two. These challenges, I think I beat them on the first day. I mean, obviously we've got something odd going on here. And I know they were just in there, I guess, to test the waters, and that's all part of the play testing and so on. But what I found was that Stellar Dominion, I think I completed them by the time my first vessel was probably up to probably in the early 20s, and it was taking out kind of level 40s in this. So I think that the scaling on that, could be improved, but I'm guessing at the moment that's all for the future. That's just to see that this whole campaign thing actually works and fits in. So for me, yes, it was real easy, but then I've been doing this for, I don't know, 9 or 10 years, I guess, and gaming online longer. I'm old enough to go back to the BBC micro computer in whenever it was, 1980 something, and been gaming ever since, although obviously not online at that time. But yeah, with a lot of experience, and you will get a lot of people with experience coming in here for a new game if it's half decent. They're really gonna kind of hammer anyone who's new to this type of game, and I'm not sure how you kind of get around that. And the only thing I can think of is with the way in which you produce a guide for it. So I think that's going to be essential to draw people in. As it stands at the moment, it didn't really explain much of the game to me. One thing I thought was superb was when I clicked this FAQ up here, and it leads me off to a website somewhere that actually explains an awful lot about the game. That's gold. That's absolutely brilliant for the people that can be bothered with it, because we had 1 or 2 in our group early on who have now left, unfortunately, who actually used that, and they really got the hang of the game pretty quick. If you could somehow translate the information that was in that FAQ through to the game, that would be brilliant. You would really get people staying a lot longer. As it stands at the moment, most people don't really see what they're doing. I think also you need something within that guide to sort of demonstrate what the whole point of the game actually is. And obviously when it's a much larger map, I think it's going to be 5 times the size, with 8 factions and a lot more territory and so on, there will undoubtedly be some kind of groupings around the outer edge of the galaxy, and slowly you'll move in to fight a couple of factions either next door or in the next layer of the circle in, and eventually end up in some central point that you're all trying to vie for to win the game. And that would be essentially, different chapters within the seasons and some kind of progression there. So that would be nice to see that sort of stage progression throughout the game, with perhaps some kind of gateways just to slow things down a little. Typically, in going back 4 or 5 years, a season in this game, in a game like this, used to last perhaps 3 to 4 months, and it was full on. It was fighting all the way, and it was fantastic. More often than not, more recent games, you've got kind of big whale groups that come in, and they've slaughtered the rest of the entire server within the space of about a week, 2 weeks, and people just basically give up and leave and go and do all the jobs that need doing around the house and paint the house. And so that's not really conducive to keeping people engaged in the game. And I think in the third part, or the third piece of this, which will be the final bit for me, I might discuss some different ways in which you can deal with that. But certainly for now, big ups for that FAQ and that information, but let's get that into the game somehow, so that it demonstrates very quickly how players get ahead, and I think hopefully the players will stay. These games have a huge dropout usually within the first week or even few days of people getting started, and nowadays you see new season 1s of this type of game almost deserted, and you would generally find plenty of people that have come in and then there's no one there to guide them, and they've just kind of given up and gone, what's the point with the game? So some things to think about there for the dev team. I hope this has been useful. I'm seriously enjoyed my time here. and I'll make the third video in a little while. Thank you very much for watching.